Welcome to my presentation. This is an unclassified information briefing pertaining to the Emergency Management Accreditation Program. My name is Neil Anderson. I'm a graduate student in emergency management at Florida State University. My goal for this presentation is to give you a brief introduction to the Emergency Management Accreditation Program, or EMAP. We're going to talk a little bit about how EMAP works, what it's comprised of, and how it benefits the emergency management community. Let's get started. What is the Emergency Management Accreditation Program? EMAP is an independent, non-profit organization established in 2003. EMAP began back in the 1990s as a dialogue within the emergency management community, recognizing the need for established professional standards within the newly emerging industry. The closest thing we had to an established standard at that time was work being done by the National Fire Protection Association, or NFPA. What we know now as the EMAP standard is based on NFPA 1600. The National Fire Protection Association standard on disaster, emergency management, and business continuity of operations programs. This standard is still current. It still exists. The biggest difference between NFPA 1600 and EMAP is that EMAP is focused completely on government and public sector, while NFPA 1600 speaks to private sector and critical infrastructure. We'll delve into a little more history in a moment. But first, I'd like to talk about what exactly EMAP does for us. EMAP encourages excellence and accountability in emergency management and homeland security programs. It maintains current, nationally recognized standards which promote interoperability and best practices. And it provides a framework for continuous improvement through self-assessment, documentation, and independent peer review. The standards within the EMAP program are recognized across the country. The next slide gives us a breakdown of how many programs are currently fully accredited. As you can see, there are 33 states, 1 tribal nation, 37 local jurisdictions, 9 federal entities, 2 international jurisdictions, 4 universities, and 1 national private sector entity. We'll discuss the criteria for accreditation in a little more depth in just a minute, but first let's get back into the history of EMAP a little, just to gain some perspective on the tremendous amount of work that was done in order to get the program to the level of success and relevance it enjoys today. Here are some milestones in the EMAP program. In 1998, the National Emergency Management Association initiates an accreditation feasibility study. In 2000, NFPA 1600 was finally published. 2001, state and local pilot program beta testing began. In 2002, the first EMAP commission was seated. And in 2003, EMAP opened for state and local program accreditation applications. EMAP has established 64 criteria by which programs that apply for EMAP accreditation are evaluated. These criteria comprise the Emergency Management Standard, which is designed as a tool for continuous improvement as part of the voluntary accreditation process for local and state emergency management programs. Here are some highlights of the Emergency Management Standard. It was first published in 2007. It's based on NFPA 1600 but geared more toward the public sector. It defines 64 separate criteria a program must meet for accreditation. And it's reviewed and updated every 3 years. The 3-year review cycle is designed to ensure committee and commission review of comments from the public, applicant programs, and assessors, as well as evolving industry practices. Let's talk about some key points and value adds from the Emergency Management Standard. The standard contains government and public sector program-specific language developed by state and local emergency management professionals, standard language, standard definitions. All the terms mean the same things. It's fully scalable for programs of any size, location, or jurisdictional level, from the smallest town to the largest city to an entire state. It specifies what components must be in place in a quality program, but does not prescribe how a program must do it. This is important because every jurisdiction and every program has different terrain, different resources, and different amounts of money that they're able to spend. Finally, the Emergency Management Standard is a strategic framework for building and sustaining a solid emergency management program. Now, I think it's important to note here exactly what an emergency management program is by definition. EMAP defines an emergency management program as a jurisdiction-wide system that provides for management and coordination of prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery activities. Those are the 5 mission areas for all hazards. The system encompasses all organizations, agencies, departments, entities, and individuals responsible for emergency management and homeland security for that jurisdiction. Now let's talk very briefly about the 5 steps to EMAP accreditation. First, there's subscription. The applicant program subscribes to EMAP for 1 calendar year and thereby gains access to the program assessment tool, which enables it to move to SEP 2, which is self-assessment and application. Once the applicant program has subscribed and attended an EMAP training course, it begins the process of self-assessment. This is a long, drawn-out process. It involves a review of the program against each of the 64 individual emergency management standards. Once that's complete, an on-site assessment is conducted. A mutually vetted external assessment team is sent from EMAP to the applicant program. The on-site assessment reviews and verifies information provided in the program's application and documentation materials. The team conducts an exit briefing and prepares an assessment report, which is then reviewed by the committee review and committee decision-making process in step 4. The committee will ultimately recommend either full accreditation, conditional accreditation, or accreditation denied. For full accreditation, compliance with all 64 standards is required. The final step is the accreditation and maintenance step, which is actually a cycle. After accreditation is achieved, programs are expected to maintain compliance with the standards and keep proof of that compliance up to date. They complete and file an annual report via the program assessment tool, and after 5 years, the whole cycle begins again. Let's talk a little bit about the EMAP philosophy. EMAP is a holistic program. It looks at the jurisdiction's entire emergency management program. It's comprehensive. It evaluates a jurisdiction's disaster response system and identifies strengths, gaps, and opportunities for improvement. And finally, it's accountable. It strengthens the nation's entire emergency management system through regular program self-assessment, thorough documentation, and independent peer review. There are many advantages to being a fully accredited program under the EMAP system. Here are just a few. An opportunity to assess against established national standards. Discipline and accountability in regularly reviewing, maintaining, and documenting compliance with standards and best practices. Common structure for review and analysis among state and local government programs nationwide. And finally, peace of mind for the citizens of that jurisdiction, evidence of their government's best efforts to comply with national standards. Finally, if you would like more information on the Emergency Management Accreditation Program, I would urge you to visit their website. at emap.org. That concludes my brief on the Emergency Management Accreditation Program. Thanks for your attention. I hope you enjoyed the presentation and found it worthwhile.